This is the Good Fire Podcast. Stories of Indigenous fire stewardship, cultural and social empowerment, and environmental integrity. Hey folks, welcome back. Episode 3 of Good Fire Season 2. It's been an incredible first 2 episodes by me and Ron Good. Just such incredible minds, incredible knowledge, incredible wisdom, and we're excited to continue to share this stuff. So last episode, we told you that we're going to be speaking to some folks from the Gathering Voices Society in British Columbia and some of the cool stuff that they've been up to the last couple of years. Amy, I'll let you introduce them and kind of what this episode is about.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so we have up for you today William Nikolakis, who's actually a lawyer. Oh, our first lawyer on the Good Fire podcast.
Boo! Okay.
But I should say yay, because his work in Indigenous rights and support for Indigenous communities has been amazing and inspirational. And so Will's an associate professor at UBC, but also runs the Gathering Voices Society, which is an Indigenous kind of not-for-profit that's doing really great work. One of their projects that they're doing is working with the Tsilhqot'in national government to bring or revitalize cultural burning practices. So we have Russell Myers-Ross, who's the former chief of Unestateen, on with Will as well today. And Russ is just the kindest man. And, he just wants to bring fire back to his nation. They've experienced so many kind of bad fires in the last few years. And so, so we're going to talk about that. But an interesting kind of way that we're going on this episode too is to talk about carbon. So one really exciting thing is that they're really planning to move into the carbon offset market as a way to fund kind of cultural burning programs. And that's kind of based on some of the work we see coming out of Australia and how they've been able to do that. So, we're going to talk with them about that, about some of the controversy around, using carbon offsets. Are we just allowing polluters to pollute more? And how do we feel about that as nations? But a really, interesting and I think different discussion for us as well.
It takes a little bit of a different turn, I think, in the second half when we get into the carbon stuff for sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I agree. Like Russ is a very soft-spoken gentleman, but I think that's because he's so thoughtful and so he's very open, honest, and even dare I use the word like vulnerable in his explanation of what's been going on in his community and his learning experience and what they're trying to accomplish there. And it was just, it was such a pleasure to listen to his thoughtful words. And Will, it is really, his commitment to find ways to help is really inspiring, right? For using his connections in academia and everything else and his knowledge to help further some of these nations is, it's very inspiring and very, very cool. Both incredible people. And I can't wait for you guys to listen to their story.
Yeah, let's launch into it.
So here we go.
First, maybe we'll get Dr. William Nikolakis to introduce himself to us and just let us know where you're from, where you work, and all that good stuff.
Yeah. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Matt. And my name is William Nikolakis. I'm executive director at the Gathering Voices Society. It's a charitable foundation based in Vancouver, but we work with primarily communities in remote and rural areas of British Columbia. And we work in stewardship. We support communities to take back their stewardship role of their lands and territories. So a big piece of what we do now is around fire stewardship. It's a huge problem confronting communities. And often they've been in positions where they've felt like passive bystanders in preventing wildfires and managing, dealing with wildfires. And it's been a huge gap. So we work directly with communities to provide that support to communities so that they can reclaim that agency to manage fire in their own ways for their own goals. And so I'm also a faculty member at UBC's Faculty of Forestry, where I set up the Bachelor of Indigenous Land Stewardship program. 4-year degree that's run out of UBC forestry. So it's basically my goal is with the work that I do is to support Indigenous stewardship of lands across Canada and globally, to bring that perspective and those practices back for managing land, shifting away from managing land just for timber values or carbon values, but managing for a holistic set of goals.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I think
that's a really cool system. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just going to say that I think you have a really interesting background too for, being in the fire world, because you're in like a law and governance side, which I think is a really important thing that often we're missing, from fire and trying to get fire back on the land.
Yeah. I most of my work has been on the ground in communities. And, I started when I was 20 working out in the bush for an Indigenous community that was protesting a uranium mine that was being proposed to be expanded on their lands. And that was the first time I saw fire being put on the landscape. And there was a ritual and a ceremony about it. And it wasn't just a haphazard thing. It was the first time I saw it. And I was like, wow. And it made me go rethink how I viewed the landscape and how lands were to be managed. And then I saw the evolution of the fire management programs in Australia. And then how they've developed and become really, really successful across Northern Australia in not only reducing wildfire and reducing carbon emissions, but protecting country, and supporting people. The health and well-being benefits and cultural benefits of people managing their lands are huge. And we've got a project now that's supported by the Public Health Agency of Canada, looking at the health and well-being benefits of community members being actively engaged in stewardship. And what are the benefits that, how does it benefit people not only physically, because you're getting a lot of physical activity being out on the land, but mentally connecting with people, being in touch with your land, feeling the agency and being empowered to manage your land with fire. So those things are really positive for people's health and well-being. And so we're actively measuring those and developing evaluation frameworks with the communities now, and so they have their own evaluation frameworks that they're measuring things that are important to them.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. How did you, I have another question just regarding how this all started for you. So how you first got involved in Indigenous land stewardship and that kind of thing, and also how Gathering Voices started.
Yeah. So I was working for a law firm, as a lawyer, you can produce very important outcomes for Indigenous peoples.
You don't have to defend them; it's okay.
and I realized that what I want to do is more hands-on. Instead of trying to wait for a court to tell you can do X, Y, Z, I thought, let's just, and I engaged with people on our board and members, Tyson Atleo and others, and we were definitely of the school of thought, well, let's just start doing things rather than waiting for the courts to say, okay, you have the rights to go out and do X, Y, Z. We kind of went, hang on, let's just go and start doing things that are important to the community. And so I really like that shift from being, okay, like we're working towards change, but actually going out and getting my hands dirty and starting to do things on the ground. I think that was, for me, the point. And so Gathering Voices came up. It was looking to be refurbished as a foundation, and we had a lot of strategic planning sessions at the time with our board and others, and we started to see stewardship as a critical ground of where we communities want to move towards, shifting towards a stewardship model where First Nations are managing land in ways that are consistent with their values and for their own goals in their own ways. When you think about it, First Nations aren't going anywhere. They've been there for a long time. They've been managing that a long time. They've got a vested interest in managing land to be healthy. Those human resources and that knowledge is really squandered in many communities without people being empowered to actually manage their land. So we saw that as our big goal, is to say, okay, our big vision for the foundation is to see every community having a stewardship program across Canada, where they're actively managing their lands, monitoring, evaluating, developing science, so that they have a scientific base so that they can measure their performance, evaluate the performance of their activities. So that was really our big picture goal that came out of our strategic planning, to see communities empowered, managing it in a systematic way, developing their own science. And so that's kind of what started Gathering Voices.
That's
I love
awesome.
it.
So
That's exciting.
I was just wondering, I was just thinking when you were speaking, like I'm an advisor for Indigenous leaderships initiatives on their hopeful Indigenous Fire Guardian program. And it sounds to me like there's a lot of similarities there, in just getting people out on their land and managing. So how do you see that kind of, like you were saying, that the stewardship thing fitting in with the, like something like the Guardians?
Yeah. So it's funny because when I've spoken to a lot of ranger programs or guardian programs or watchman programs, and they don't see fire being within their ballpark. They see that as kind of being, an emergency or safety issue. So we go around changing that. And so, our goal is is very practical. We're about putting people on the ground and supporting community. We had over 40 people employed in our fire programs this year in both communities in Tsilhqot'in, Unisaitin, and we're about really getting people out, not sitting around and sort of talking, which is great. To have those. I'm an academic. We have a lot of those talk fests. But it's not going to stop the big problems, which is wildfire, ecological degradation, invasive species, loss of food security. All those things are huge problems. And, I was like, and I'm very practical focused. I'm about like, okay, let's just do stuff and start working towards it. So my goal is to just start doing things and from that momentum, start seeing the ambitions. And Victor Stephenson kind of calls it, he said one of his elders said to him, it's practical action. And so that's definitely been one of our mottos, is just, learning by doing, getting out and just practicing and doing things, and rather than kind of waiting and talking about it and just doing it.
Yeah,
I love that. Yeah. It's funny. It's funny how that most of our progress in society tends to get caught up in the planning stage, right? It never gets initiated. But yeah, just get boots on the ground, start doing stuff, and we'll learn as we go. I love that. That's a great way to do it.
Yeah, and we have a really open door policy, like with fire training, because I did get the sense that it was a very male dominated thing. Amy, I don't know, like if you found that when you started.
100%. I rant about it all the time on here, like the patriarchal, whatever that word is, nature of fire management, and how it doesn't fit in with an Indigenous worldview on fire at the moment.
And when I look around, a lot of the key people that are involved in our work are women, and running this fire work, and I think so that's been transformative that way, about stewardship not being only just a male domain, but expanding that. So, our aim is to have gender parity for all our employees. And, it's about taking it back from being that kind of, I think we have to, it's a cultural thing how we manage fire. Right now the Western model is when a fire starts, we put it out, and, it's very heroic, and the work of the proactive fire management, of people going out and doing the prescribed burning and the science and the planning, that it's not very sexy, or, it doesn't fit within that kind of cultural model of it being, of putting major fires out and, soot on your face and, hoses, and it's, anyone can be involved in it. And we've had kids and we've had elders, and we do a lot of ground, and we work through a lot of ground. So it's breaking down those barriers about fire. And I know, Amy, you talk a lot about that in your work too, about, transforming how we view fire, and seeing, rather than seeing it as a foe, an enemy, seeing it as a friend, a tool in our toolkit.
Awesome. So can we just back up just a little bit so you had the Gathering Voices Society. What made you, if you go on their website, the Gathering Voices Society website, you can see the Tsilhqot'in wildfire management page that really details the work that you're doing there. So I'm just wondering what led to, you starting that relationship with that community in particular?
Yeah, so it actually came about. Russ and I met at a governance conference at UBC in November 2015, and we were looking at governance, and we just started chatting at certain periods, and we started talking about stewardship and payment for ecosystem services, and then the conversations then turn into the carbon firework in Australia, and so Russ mentioned at the time that he was really concerned about the land base around Stone and in the Tsilhqot'ins. He basically thought it was, he had major concerns about wildfire risk, which was proven true a year and a half later when you had the huge fires in 2017. And that really kind of kickstarted. So Russ and I started talking about potentially doing some work together about setting up building on their stewardship program and looking for ways for funding to expand it. And the fire stewardship stuff was there, but after 2017, we kind of said, okay, it's about fire stewardship, about not only in terms of healing the land that was devastated, because, we have a tendency to think that land that's been devastated by wildfire, that we can turn our back on it and we don't have to worry about healing it, restoring it, or it's kind of like, okay, we don't have to think about that for another 20 years. But that land needs restoration. That land needs healing too. And land that's left, that needs to be protected. And because if you look at the land base there, it's going to be decades and decades before that land becomes productive, if ever, because there's areas that haven't been. Oh, we've got Russ here now too. So
speak of the devil.
Yeah. So for those of you, we are recording this podcast. And of course, I was just saying to Matt and Will, we never have technical difficulties anymore recording this. As any podcast people will know that, your life is full of them. So we finally got Russ here. So yay, Russ. Nice to see you again.
Hey, how are you doing?
Good. I can hear you well. We were just having a kickoff chat there with Will about his background, the Gathering Voices Society, and what kind of started your partnership together. So maybe we'll just kind of, start the same with you. So, if you could just introduce yourself to our listeners, where you're from, what you do, and how you got into fire.
You timed it perfectly, I must say. Your entrance.
Right on. Yeah, well, my name is Russell Myers-Ross. I'm from Unit 18 and part of the Tsilhqot'in Nation. I ended up becoming chief in 2012 and ran 2 terms to 2020. And so some of this work came from when I was in leadership. So it was about 2015 actually meeting William. And then I think we were discussing that it was around 2016, we had ongoing conversations around ecosystem type services. And then when the fires hit, I think that was the epiphany that we would work together specifically on fire management and the idea of trying to prevent this from happening and finding ways to restore it. And then I think in 2018, we were able to meet Victor Stephenson and sort of have that first sort of kickoff meeting and understanding and getting into the field and trying to exchange knowledge about what it's like in Australia and compare it to what's happening here. And then in 2019, we were able to do our first spring burn. And then I think it's been sort of an evolution from there, but I definitely think it's been just a learning experience the whole way through.
So just talking about, I know the Victor Stephenson visit to your guys' nation was really impactful. And I think most people listening to this podcast will know who Victor Stephenson is, kind of one of the original fire keepers from Australia who, has been on the land for a long time, wrote a great book called Fire Country. And came to Canada, to your nation to work with you, I think, just on fire. Can you tell us what that was like? I know that there's a big thing where, we say Indigenous people can't go between nations or even continents because our knowledge is so localized. But I'm interested in your perspectives on having Victor visit.
Yeah, Victor, I've heard he's a celebrity, but I haven't been into the zone to know what the awe is.
We're trying to book him for this podcast, and I'll tell you that it's very difficult. He's a very busy guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think when he came in 2018 and 19, it was really, I think he really wanted to see what the similarities were like. So he was comparing the plants, comparing the landscape, just trying to test things out. And, I think he found that there was a lot of similarities just from looking at the land base. And I think a lot of it was just centered on like the way that the grass flows and its connection to, his understanding of like seeing the trees and seeing, if it has resin or the oil or like how does it burn. And so there's a lot of similarities, despite that obvious local Indigenous knowledge that we carry. But I think for us it was just a confidence boost, really. We didn't know, like I say, we don't know his celebrity or like how well known he is or anything in Australia or other places. So, he's just Victor to us, but he carries that leadership that allowed us, to have confidence in applying fires. And we always had, in the background, we had the ministry and other people like always worried about escapement and worried about the worst case scenario. And it just, it's always in your ear about, the worry that you're going to burn the whole country down again. And for Victor, he's like, nothing's ever happened. And, when I've done this type of work. And so that level of confidence of he being in there and knowing that you could light a fire and that it wouldn't, it wouldn't go anywhere. That you didn't want it to go. I thought that was a huge boost. And I think just the camaraderie, like it made, especially that first year where we only had a handful of us, but the camaraderie itself was just, just amazing. And people look back on it fondly and they learn so fast over such a short period of time.
That's so exciting. It's awesome to hear. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, what was the response, Russ, to when you guys finally got to start burning again and started to bring that back in? Because I watched the documentary on the Gathering Voices website there, and it's a super well done, like does such a good job, I thought, of portraying what this practice is, right? And what was the response in the community to having this something that your people would have done, having it come back? How did it change, say, the atmosphere or people's outlook on the future?
Well, for the community itself, I think there's a lot of learning to do still. Like it's not like it changed our whole community in a sense, but I think we've approached it by a learn by doing approach, and really the people that actually get to apply fire, they're the ones that get to learn like a huge amount. And like I said, in a shorter period of time, like in one spring session, we have new people and they gain appreciation of it, doing 3 or 4 or 5 days of work. So yeah, I think the benefit for the people that are actually doing it is immense. And I could lecture to them. I could explain all the stuff, you could read or listen to a lot of different things, but it doesn't measure up to like actually just being out there for one day to do it. And then I think that's where it clicks for people, that, being able to do it. And then they kind of take that experience and that knowledge that they just gained, and they're able to they talk about this stuff as well. And, I think even for the past people that started in 2019, my cousins, Dwayne Hink and Jafan Smith, they're also there kind of coaching or saying like, well, that's not the way it's supposed to be done. Or like, they have kind of a baseline understanding of what to expect when they do that work. So yeah, it's really neat to see just people learn and be able to be in a position to teach and to, have high expectations of what it's like.
Mm-hmm. What about for you personally? What was the impact on the way you perceived it?
Yeah, I take the same approach where, I know I'm fitting into shoes that our ancestors have been in, where they look at land and they look at it need to be restored, and you apply fire. So, for me, actually doing it it just feels good. And, sometimes I think, there's a lot of people I find that caution the type of work, but I sometimes think that there's very little harm done. It's almost like applying water to the land, and being able to renew it. And, so it has a good feeling, every time you're able to apply it, and knowing that like there's going to be greener grass, or there's going to be more growth coming in later on. And I just enjoy being I just enjoy being on the land, for one, and it makes you feel healthy, and you're breathing the air, and even if it's a bit of smoke, and and it's also just like sometimes, at least for us, it's sort of reimagining what our ancestors walked through. And I think William got to walk through it this fall, where we were seeing spots where we might even see like underground houses from basically walking in our ancestors' footprints. And so it's a bit of a discovery as well. And I think that's part of just getting on the land and just deepening that connection. So I'm just happy to be a part of it, and I'm happy to be on the land more so than actually trying to coordinate everything. So
yeah. Well, I always say to people, it's not just about fire, it's about more than fire for many of the nations that want to burn. And so, Will, I'm just wondering, what was it like for you being an observer there to the community? What did you kind of see occurring as they, returned fire?
Everyone was so excited about taking that back and being on the land, and the energy is awesome. And I always come back super recharged after spending time and just seeing the way that everyone works together and everyone has a deep connection to the land, and that being able to give expression to that is such a powerful thing to be a part of. Yeah,
that's great. So what are the ultimate goals for you guys of your, the partnership with the Gathering Voices Society? Are you hoping to burn every spring and fall, have that kind of regularly occurring? Are you hoping to, expand into, broader territory? What do you see for the future?
Yeah, our immediate goals for the next 5 years, we have 5 years of support over that next 5 years, is to make this a permanent program. We're right now developing rules and guidelines for a carbon credit to be produced from this work. So we're developing all the fire modeling in Prometheus and looking at a fire predictor model and measuring what the potential emissions are that we're mitigating, greenhouse gas emissions that we're mitigating from our activities. So there's a lot of work to do to get that over the line. So that's really our first priority, and to really build this program into something that is self-sustaining. And that communities across Canada can learn from. Not only Canada, but we get messages and calls and emails from people in New Mexico, Oregon, California, Brazil, other places where they've seen our video and they're like, how do we do this? And so I think the video work and that stuff is such a powerful tool to inspire people, and they can learn how that they can take this firework back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just one more question I had was about the 41 people you employed. So was that for a few days to burn? How did you get the funding? I think people will be really interested in knowing that.
Yeah. So we have an open door policy, and Russ can kind of talk about that too, about how we kind of if anyone's interested, we bring them in. Russ, you could probably talk a little bit about that too.
Yeah, I mean it's tricky. I mean, as we're developing the program, we're trying to contrast it to how, attempting not to mimic, the Forest Service or the firefighting service on, trying to create, the 5-man packs or however they organize themselves. So, I mean, we do try to pull together a core team, and then, I mean, we're lucky that we have available resources to sort of like bring in anybody. So, trying to encourage, like elders to come out, or trying to encourage people and just say, hey, do you want to spend just a day with us? That's fine. Come on out and experience it and see if you like it. And also trying to encourage the school to be involved. So even this fall, having some of the children come out, and it was a little bit tricky because it was a little bit difficult just with the temperatures and stuff like that. But I was able to make it kind of a perimeter with a few of us, and then we were able to sort of bring the children in the next day, and they got to apply fire to the land. So yeah, just trying to figure out ways to, to educate and teach responsibilities at an early age. But I think, all the Williams work too, it's, between research and the photographs and the video, like it's all there to really support the program. I think we're just piloting it and then testing it out to see how much more we can expand and, grow from sort of what, even though it's a lot of people, it's still, we still have a long ways to go, I guess, to like gain more experience and have more people that could probably take a lead on this work.
Mm-hmm. So I can't imagine a more engaging way to get kids to pay attention to something, to say, hey, guys want to go light some stuff on fire? What?
I was happy the teacher was saying, you can't just apply fire everywhere and anywhere. because I was there to encourage the use of it. So
It's interesting though how, to me, always our educational campaigns for kids are about the fear of fire. Like my daughter's 6, and she came home from school and was just talking like stop, drop, and roll and all that. And I mean, it's important, but we don't have that equivalent teaching of like a respect for fires, or that we need fire, but there's ways. So I always take my kids out and just tell them, like, this is like, fire's good. And my daughter always says like, no, fires can be good. It can make the grass green. Like, and she understands like at 6 years old. And also, I'll bet she won't be one of those kids, out behind the school with the matchbox, because, you normalize it and normalize the activity of using fire. So it's not like a rebellious thing either, that kids can do. So yeah, I'm totally supportive of taking kids out and like teaching them about fire in good ways.
I want to go up to your house sometime, Amy. You can teach my daughter.
Yeah. Our daughters are almost the same age, our little ones. So yeah, for sure. So just back to the 41 people. So, because one of the things too that's always interesting is that how, for the BC Wildfire Service and thing, we pay those people, right, to do their job. But for many Indigenous communities, it's expected, if you want to be involved in fire, for it to be like a volunteer thing. So I really find that encouraging that you guys are compensating people for their time, and just wondering how, so is it kind of on a daily rate then? If people come out to a burn, you kind of compensate them for their time that way? Or are these people that, you staff for a few weeks? How does it work?
Yeah, it's a few different methods. I mean, I think, like I mentioned, I think we try to have like a core group so they know that they're responsible for it, and then we just try to encourage people. And right now, I mean, we're lucky through Gathering Voices Society that we've managed to, secure a fair bit of funding from foundations and other sources. So we do pay people honoraria, and then some people have even just been okay with just gift certificates and stuff like that. So there is a fair bit of compensation at this point. But yeah, I mean, thinking down the road, I do see there's still going to be a need for like making this into like work and people finding employment and out of it. But I also do see the more that we do it, the more responsible people feel. And I mean, sometimes I drive down the road or walk in a certain area and I'm like, this needs fire. And, there shouldn't be any qualms of like me waiting for money to do it, so I do see, the long-term benefit, the more we, end up respecting what the land needs, I think the more responsibilities people will take on to go like, this needs to be done, whether I get paid or not. So I do have that sense, especially that first year with, Dwayne and Jafan. I think that's how we kind of came away, just looking at the landscape completely different. And so I hope that that's the same feeling that the rest of the community has, as we start looking at the land a little bit differently as we keep working with it.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm not the only one, because whenever I go on walks, I just look at everything I can burn. So good to know that it's not only me.
I'm excited. I kind of want to know how this came about. Like originally, how did you get the government to accept this concept and move forward with it, and allow, in quotation marks, this type of stuff to happen? Because that's something we've talked about in past episodes, is that governance kind of putting the brakes on it every time someone brings it up. So how did you finally break through this barrier?
I think if I could start, I think the 2017 wildfires had a huge impact on it. I think, it was sort of the aftermath of that. I think people realized that whatever forest practices they've been applying, or that they obviously had a huge blind spot on how they were looking at the landscape and how they were suppressing everything. And so there was a lot of discussion about it. I think there was quite a fair bit of, asking questions about how to do it better and how to include Indigenous people afterwards. So I think there was a huge appetite to learn and engage and to open up that space. But there are still, there's still those. I think we're lucky to have, at least in Williams Lake area, that we do have a fire center and lands department for the BC government that are open to it, and kudos to the people working in those in the organization that are listening, and I really appreciate especially one of the fellows for not wanting to apply a cookie cutter approach to it as well. He's said we need to work individually with each community, and each community has a different way of doing things. So he's taking that as a principle, I think is a huge thing as well, and not trying to try to fit us in a box in some sort of way. But I also think the one big advantage we had is we did that original Gathering Voices Society. We didn't ask permission. We actually did the kind of guerrilla fires, and I think we were respectful for the people around us, and we mostly did it on the reserve sort of boundaries. But for the most part, we did the video so that we could show, look, we did it. We shouldn't be asking for permission. We sort of know what we're doing, and we can organize to do this and build confidence around it. And but I think the one advantage we had with Gathering Voices Society is that we built up funding where we weren't sort of just asking government for money. We already had it in hand and had a means to organize, and so that we could say, we're going to do it. It'd be nice if you gave us permission on our own land, but we have an intention of doing it, and we have the resources, and we're not asking, for money at this point.
Mm-hmm. That's a huge deal.
Yeah, and I think that there was some approvals put in place. You put some applications in for it to get it approved. It just took so long that it was we're going to miss the burn window, and there was confusion, and I think it just took so long, and just you have to be on this stuff. fight. You have to be proactive. You just can't sit around and wait. So I think that was a critical thing for Russ and the community was, that there's no time to wait. Their community was threatened with the wildfire. It was right at their doorstep. And so action needed to be taken.
I keep trying to impress upon people as well that it's such a different risk, like the type of burning that Russ and his community want to do in many nations. Like you can see, if they want to go and light a large crown fire production burn, on the side of a mountain, it's things that you might need a really good prescription and plan to do that. But I mean, for me too, like to go and burn the meadow out in front of my house when there's still snow on the ground everywhere. Like we just go do it as well because it's so low risk, right? For doing the work. And I recently heard or saw on Twitter a guy who was talking about, that they need to build burn 1 million hectares in California. And he was saying, well, that's no big deal if we have like 1 million homeowners burning 1 hectare each. But right now we have one agency like trying to do it all by themselves. So we're never going to get there.
Interesting.
Yeah, that was one big observation. And I'd love to explore this more deeply, Amy, but my theory, just from observing all this stuff, is that Indigenous burning is far more efficient a practice at prescribed burning than other centralized models. Just from what I've seen on this small pilot, I'd love to test it economically and in terms of efficiency, but just from what I've seen initially, I think that it's by far a way more efficient approach to this issue around addressing fuel loads and fire risk around communities in BC at least.
Yeah, interesting. I know Bill Snow from Stony Nakota as well was talking with me about burning, and he was saying that they're really against the use of accelerants that agencies use in burning to put on the landscape, the heli torching and all the different things that go on where they're, putting diesel and other fuels in the landscape. So to them, that was, why Indigenous burning practices were so much better, because you're not introducing foreign substances to like an already fragile ecosystem.
Yeah.
I know Russ probably, and I know Victor has his views around using drip torches and other diesels, and Russ, what has it been I know you've got some views around kind of the use of diesel as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think it depends how and where to apply those things probably. But I mean, generally I think it's as cheap as having a match, right? Like, so to keep it. And I do think that just from observing that if you apply, a lighter or match, that the intensity is much lower. It crawls fast or slower. And then, but when you add fuel, sometimes it ends up raging, just the intensity of the burn. And yeah, I do see potentially certain areas where you have to cordon off areas to do back burning, or where you have to apply to sort of lessen the load in certain areas before you can apply in some spots. Like I could see a use for fuels potentially, but overall I definitely think it's probably better for the environment if it just creeps at a slow pace.
Mm-hmm. Well, it almost seems to me like it's to go from a more spiritual side of it. It's like if all you need is a match and just a tiny little flame, it seems like if it doesn't burn with that, then maybe it's not ready to burn just quite yet, right? Maybe you're supposed to wait. I don't know.
Yeah, many Indigenous nations too use branches and sap to make their own drip torches. I still think that that's where, to make a drip torch was probably appropriated from looking at how Indigenous people were using sap on the, or pitch on the landscape, to spread their fires. So yeah, I don't know. We need to do some research on that one, Will, to find out the invention of the drip torch.
So I had a question about the the public response, or even just the response in your community, Russ, around a relationship to fire now that this is going on? I know this has only been going on for a few years, but so what is the response within your community and also outside of the community? Because you guys just experienced a huge, devastating wildfire. So I imagine people are probably on edge about fire and that kind of thing. So how has this changed perception, or has it changed perception at all?
It's funny. I could almost say that it hasn't changed that much of the perception. It's almost as if people have been around fire like throughout their whole lives. Like, and I'm like trying to think of the elders and how they respond to it. It's almost as if this isn't new. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Even though for me it might be like, this is a new program and we got lots of like support and resources to put towards it, and it's a new engagement with government and all that sort of stuff. But the perspective from part of my community is that, you know, fire's been with us. We've had a long tradition of having fire keepers, and you know, even if they're jumping on fire crews over the last decade, or whether it was like 50 years ago. So there's just a lot of experience around fire, and even culturally, the use around fire is you know, for food and cooking and other things is quite high. So it doesn't excite anybody. Is what I'm saying, because I think the perspective, or that's just my sense of things. But but I think for other people, you know, that have talked to me, you know, they're excited to see what we were able to do, you know, and some other First Nations communities, like they want to see this. They want to see it, you know, start, or you know, they're looking for answers just as much as anybody else. Especially every crisis that you see, you know, everyone's looking for another answer to help alleviate, you know, the next big crisis or something like that. So
yeah,
and there is a debate out there about that, you know, is Indigenous fire management practices an ideology rather than a practice grounded in a scientific, you know, a basis. And it obviously is, right? And so, but what we're doing actively with our program is developing science around it. And, you know, not only around greenhouse gas emissions, but what is the effect on grasslands and flora and fauna, ungulates, moose. So we're actively going out and looking at that, and berries and wild potato. What are the effect of burning, and being able to measure that over the longer term, so that we can actually, you know, have this scientific basis that we can, not only for the community, but for others to demonstrate the importance of it.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And that's something too, perfect transition there, because I really wanted to end too on the carbon offset work that you guys are doing. I think that it's really unique in Canada. I know that there is other Aboriginal communities in Australia that are already basically funding their cultural fire programs through these carbon offsets that we're getting. So I'm wondering if you could just, Will, give maybe just like an overview for people who might not understand like the whole black carbon offset idea, and then get into how you're applying that with your program.
Yeah, so I've spent a lot of my career in Northern Australia. I work closely with the Northern Australian Indigenous Land and Sea Management Alliance, with the Northern Land Council and other land councils, and I really got to see and witness the emergence and growth of Indigenous fire programs, formal fire programs, across that landscape. And it was well documented, the importance of these programs. We had lots of scientific data, the work of Jeremy Russell Smith and others, groundbreaking in terms of understanding the effect of Indigenous fire practices on the landscape. And what they saw in Australia was applying early dry season fires, so the cool burns earlier in the year, prevented intense, large-scale, late dry season fires. And that sounds reasonable to most people, right? You burn the fuel off in and then it grows back green, and then later in the dry season, there's green fuel or no fuel at all. So you're not getting those huge fires that have huge greenhouse gas pulses from those fires. So, and you had devastation on the landscape. It was changing the landscape, destroying pockets of monsoonal rainforest, sacred sites, destroying biodiversity. So those practices actually prevented all these were actually preventing all these negative outcomes from wildfire. And so some scientists and others came together and said, how can we monetize the greenhouse gas emissions that we're preventing from being emitted into the atmosphere? And so in Australia, they developed a methodology, rules and guidelines around measuring the effect of Indigenous fire practices on emissions stopped from carbon emissions or greenhouse gas emissions stopped from these fire practices. So we're learning from that model, which now employs hundreds, if not thousands of people, generates tens of millions of dollars for communities across Northern Australia to implement their fire practices. We're looking at how that model can be translated to Canada by looking at the pilot with Tsilhqot'in and Tsilhqot'in. And so the nuts and bolts of it is we measure the emissions from the fire practices that we conduct, and then what we're seeing is that wildfire is growing across Canada in terms of intensity and large scale. So we're having to predict now that the fire regimes are different from Australia to Canada, but what we're seeing is an increase in intense and destructive wildfire across Canada. So we're developing a model that predicts the potential emissions from fires with the trends that we're seeing and what our practices can mitigate. So we're measuring the emissions or modeling the emissions from these fire practices from destructive wildfire, and we're comparing those to what we're emitting from our fire practices and what we're stopping from being emitted into the atmosphere. And that difference between those two, we're hoping to market as carbon credits. Now, so there's a lot of modeling and other things and we've got to go out into the field and measure our own emissions in April. But that difference between what our emissions are from our burning and what we're able to stop from these dramatic wildfires, we're hoping to use that as a carbon emission, carbon credit that we can market. And we're already seeing a huge appetite for people that want to purchase those carbon credits. We've had several large insurance companies come to us and say, we love what you're doing with your work. Intact has been a great supporter for us, Intact Foundation. And being able to say, okay, the work that you're doing, we're recognizing that it's going to stop X amount of emissions. And so those potentially could be marketed, and either in the compliance or voluntary market. That's what we're moving towards, is being able to get it certified under the compliance, the federal standards when they come out, also in the voluntary standards, so we can sell our credits into both markets.
That's awesome. Oh,
I think you're on mute, Matt, online.
Yeah, no, I realized that afterwards.
We have to leave that in for the podcast. Just like a super awkward Zoom microphone moment.
But yeah, that's awesome to hear that. So is the idea to hope to use those carbon credits to pay the people that are going to be doing the burning?
Absolutely, yeah. So
that's awesome.
That would support the program over the long term. So, it creates sustainability for the program over the long term. And, there's some caveats that we obviously have to think about. Are we robbing Peter to pay Paul, with supporting energy development and emissions somewhere else and we're mitigating them here? And, there's some really big questions around what these are, but what these carbon credits are. But in my mind, what we're proposing is that we want to measure also the social and economic benefits to communities as well, so that we tack those on to the program. So we're not only burning for carbon, but we're burning for other social and livelihood benefits for communities, biodiversity benefits, so that's calculated and factored into what we're doing. That this is more than just a carbon program, but it's a larger program that addresses a bunch of different goals.
Awesome. Russ, what's your take on it? What do you think about carbon?
I think the intention was, the big thing was just piloting it in our community and seeing if it works, and seeing if it moves forward. And then as a program, though, we're trying to think how do we grow and how do we expand. We just think of like the amount of hectares that we're able to cover now, and it's kind of it's amazing, but it's also minuscule in the sense that we need to like be covering this much, and we only have 6 weeks to do it in the spring and a little bit of time in the fall. so like trying to get the capacity built so that you can do a huge amount of work in a small amount of time, and then trying to figure out like an economic model that we can do it where we can get that work done and organize in the off seasons and be able to do that work in the spring, I think is important. So yeah, I think at this point, we're trying to give ourselves as much opportunity as we can. And I think we still know there's probably a little bit of an uphill battle on like how to structure it or how to inform government or different levers of opening up, the whole carbon market. And like William said, there's probably an ethical piece in there as well about, what we're willing to accept and where the money is coming from. But yeah, I think just in general, I think the intent is to try to have a long-term program.
Super exciting. That's awesome.
Yeah, and figuring out what our work, what it prevents from being emitted into the atmosphere, that's the big question that we're tackling, and we've got some carbon scientists working on it right now, and they're working in a new field. There's been nothing like it in Canada. The standards aren't really built around this work, but we're able to learn from and know that it's been successful in Australia. So what can we learn from it? It's different ecosystems and different fire regimes, but there's something there around the architecture of that work that we can apply here. And so we're hoping to have something deeper early in the new year and start working towards developing the program and the carbon program and understanding what our own emissions are from the work, and then figuring out, what are we preventing from being, what's our work preventing from being emitted into the atmosphere? And so that's the next phase of this work.
Nice. That's what it was funny when we had that first meeting. I kind of thought that we already knew that, or, I just had that assumption in my head. And I really, from that first meeting, realized how complex it is to try and do this type of work you guys are wanting to do, just with all the carbon folks. And then, you've got fire science on top of it, burning. Yeah, it's a handful, but I'm really excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, me too. It's cool to see this happening right here in Canada. I feel like up to this point, everything we've talked about on the podcast has been about elsewhere, right? So I'm excited to see it happening here at home.
Yeah, actually that's true. I think this is our first Canada one, except for me just, going on about the Canadian situation. But yeah, I was going to say too, so maybe just like to wrap up today too, Russ, I was just wondering, I know like I saw some beautiful pictures of you with your daughter out on the land and teaching her to burn and to use fire. And I'm just wondering if you could just talk about, that experience, what she thought about, putting fire back and being able to be out there with you.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, like I want this to be an intergenerational event, and I saw the pictures that Victor Stephenson had when he first came up in 2018, and one picture just like it was like those pictures that tell a story, and I saw one where it was like a grandmother holding their like granddaughter's hand and right on the fire line. And they're sort of looking at the fire moving into the tree line. But, I wasn't trying to get that exact same picture, but it was nice to have our photographers capture a few pictures there.
Always good to have a professional photographer around.
Yeah. But yeah, I think the idea was just that. It was just, I keep thinking of how we need to like, not only like share that intergenerational knowledge, but just that picture of wanting the community surrounded by this, and to keep showing that it has to be more of a community effort than it is like having the fire center, or like delegating it to like an institution that sort of just like parachutes in and like does their thing, and trying to like develop a bit more awareness and responsibility from within. So, and like I said, you can only learn by doing it. And so I took my daughter out of school and, spent the day with her, and she learned fast. I think she was 7 at the time, but I mean, she was like, I think a month later, she's like, when are we going back to stone to burn?
Yeah.
and it's like, oh, well, the burning season's out right now. But yeah, I mean, she had a good experience with it, and yeah, she wants to continue doing it. So
yeah, that's awesome. And like you guys said, that's about taking that out of that masculine field and really going back to, where it's an everybody thing, elders, kids, women, men, all out there on our land.
Well, congratulations, you guys, on accomplishing this. I can't imagine it was easy. I imagine there was a lot of hardship and a lot of scratching your head, but you guys pulled it off. So I hope it continues to grow and do well, and you guys can just keep doing what you're doing. It's awesome.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amy.
So proud of the work you guys are doing. And Russ, I mean, now we're sitting on all these different fire committees. I see you regularly now. So, I mean, even in that way, maybe things are changing. I should have a more positive outlook.
Yeah. It's funny because I don't see all the things that you see in terms of like the barriers. Like, I'm just happy that we have sort of like, that, yeah, I mean, there's the barriers in the case of like, wrapping people's head around things, and there's like procedural things, and like, but I always feel like we're going to get it done one way or the other. And yeah, and I'm sometimes surprised that like there's stuff that gets blocked in other places in Canada. And yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that all this work is, going to be a wedge to like make sure it can happen in other places, and that, yeah, the leadership, and that we're able to share a little bit about how to do it, if anything.
Yeah,
seems
that's
like
great.
it.
I think too. So just to maybe go on that and to wrap up with is that we have a publication coming out actually with Russ and Will and a bunch of other folks on. I think it's called The Right to Fire and Barriers to Cultural Burning Practices in Canada. So that, look out for that one. It's coming out through Faucets. And then I just wanted to mention the other publications from Gathering Voices Society on this. So William and Emma were co-authors on one out of a journal called Risk, Hazards, and Crisis in Public Policy, called Wildfire Governance in a Changing World, Insights for Policy Learning and Policy Transfer. And then Busy Publishers, they had another one come out too in the International Journal of Wildland Fire called Goal Setting and Indigenous Fire Management, a Holistic Perspective. So both of those are, with the work that they're doing with Russ's community. So yeah, great job on that and, getting the good word out there.
Yeah, thank you too, Amy. Your work's been an inspiration for us too, and your publishing work. So, and Russ has been involved too. And so after the CIF conference and other things, so not only are we trying to get the video work out, but also get the academic publications out.
Yep, for
That's
sure.
awesome.
All good.
We'll make sure to link all that stuff in the show notes too. We have show notes this year, AB. We're going to have more detail. It's great.
Oh yeah. Check out the Your Forest website. Is that where it's going to be on?
It should be on wherever you're getting it. Like if people are listening to this on Apple or Google, it should be there. So Yeah, all those links will be there when this does release and whenever that is, sometime in 2022.
We're trying to make the podcast more accessible to people. So with a very, very limited budget, I would say. So although we do thank Canada Wildfire and others for all the, contributions to this, but it's definitely, podcasts are not cheap, shockingly enough. Okay, thanks everyone. And yeah, keep up the good fight. A good luck spring burning next year. Probably when these episodes come out, it'll be spring maybe, right, Matt? And you guys will be up there burning.
That's what I'm thinking. As long as you can wrangle up all the rest of the interviews, then we should be okay. Thanks a lot for listening, folks. I hope you enjoyed that. I know listening to Russ and Will give their examples of the type of stuff they were learning and their next steps is really exciting and cool to hear. So, I can't wait to jump into the next conversation.
Yeah, I think up next we have a study that was actually on Indigenous firefighters. So the study's called, I should look up the name of the study. I think it's Giving Voice. Oh, yeah, the name of the study is Giving Voice to Cultural Safety of Indigenous Firefighters in Canada. And we have on two of the researchers with us. So Dr. Natasha Caverly and Joe Gilchrist, who's a firekeeper from the Interior Salish Firekeepers. And they're going to come and talk about something that we don't really talk about much, which is the role of Indigenous firefighters in wildfire management agencies. And really have some, I think, kind of shocking and interesting findings that will really need to be addressed by the wider wildfire community.
Yeah, no, it was definitely an interesting episode. We're talking about the lack of academic papers, the lack of, quote unquote proof about Indigenous wildfire and that kind of thing. And then talking about cultural safety, which was a term I'd actually never heard before. And so I learned a lot about that. That was cool. So I hope everyone liked this episode. We can't wait for you to join us again it'll be episode 4.
Yes.
Can't wait.
Perfect.
So we'll catch you folks next time. Take it easy. A huge thank you to Canada Wildfire for their support of this podcast. As well, we would like to thank the Fighting Gunditjmara for allowing us to share their fire song Ween as the official song of Good Fire Podcast.